Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of the vast crystal chamber, his hands steady at his sides despite the weight of judgment pressing down on him. The Galactic Coordination Council chamber stretched above him like the inside of a massive diamond, its walls catching and reflecting the light from 12 different suns. Each beam of light represented one of the member species, and today all 12 beams seemed focused on condemning humanity. The Vrex Counselor, a towering reptilian creature with scales that shifted from green to deep purple, raised one clawed hand for silence. His voice carried the authority of millennia when he spoke. Commander Morrison of the human species, you stand accused of leading your people in actions that threaten galactic peace and stability. Morrison kept his face calm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Behind him in the observation gallery, Captain Lisa Harper watched with barely contained anger. She had warned him this day would come, but Morrison had believed that reason and diplomacy could bridge any gap between species. The charges are serious, continued the Vrex Counselor. Your species has colonized 47 worlds in just 2 centuries. You have refused to limit your population growth as mandated by council law. Your military forces exceed the boundaries set for new member species. Most concerning of all, you have rejected our guidance on peaceful expansion and cultural integration. The chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the translation devices that allowed all species to understand each other. Morrison had practiced his defense speech countless times during the long journey to Nexus Prime, but now the words felt hollow in his mouth. Honored counselors, Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. Humanity has never sought to threaten any member of this council. Our expansion has been peaceful. We have shared our discoveries freely with all species. We have contributed our knowledge of agriculture, medicine, and technology to the common good. A ripple of what might have been laughter came from the Zenithy representative, a being of pure energy that flickered between blue and white inside a containment field. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Peaceful, you say? Yet your species maintains military fleets larger than any 2 council members combined. You speak of sharing, yet you guard your most advanced technologies as state secrets. Morrison felt his diplomatic training kick in. Every species maintains defenses appropriate to their territory. As for our technology, we have shared everything the Council has requested. We merely protect innovations that could be misused in the wrong hands. The insectoid Cathera Counselor clicked its mandibles in what Morrison had learned was their equivalent of disagreement. Its compound eyes reflected the chamber's light in thousands of tiny fragments. This is precisely the problem with your species. You believe you can decide what is best for the galaxy. You act without consultation. You expand without permission. You think your way is the only way. Captain Harper's hands gripped the gallery railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had fought alongside these beings during the Outer Rim conflicts, had saved Kythera colonies from asteroid strikes, had shared resources during the Great Famine on Kepler 7. Now they spoke as if humanity were strangers, as if the bonds forged in battle and cooperation meant nothing. The Etherean representative, a tall figure wrapped in flowing robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself, remained silent throughout the proceedings. The Etherians rarely spoke at council meetings, but their votes carried significant weight. Morrison found himself hoping that their silence meant consideration rather than condemnation. One by one, the other species added their voices to the charges. The crystalline Vorthak complained that human mining operations were too efficient, disrupting established trade patterns. The aquatic Nereidans protested that human terraforming techniques changed worlds too quickly, not allowing time for proper environmental assessment. The plant-like Verdani accused humans of being too aggressive in their agricultural development, consuming resources at unsustainable rates. Morrison listened to each accusation, his heart sinking further with every word. These were not the voices of allies he had hoped to hear. These were the complaints of beings who saw humanity not as partners but as competitors, perhaps even as threats. You speak of our flaws, Morrison said when the accusations finally ended. But you ignore our contributions. Human medical technology has extended lifespans across 12 worlds. Our agricultural methods have ended famine on 6 systems. Our defensive innovations have protected council space from raiders and pirates. We have asked for nothing in return except the right to exist alongside you as equals. The Vrex Counselor's tail lashed behind him, a sign of impatience that Morrison recognized from previous meetings. Equals, you say, yet you refuse to accept the limitations that all species must accept to maintain galactic harmony. You will not control your population. You will not reduce your military. You will not slow your expansion. You demand the benefits of council membership while rejecting the responsibilities. Morrison felt the moment slipping away from him. Everything he had worked for, everything humanity had dreamed of since first contact was crumbling in this crystal chamber light years from home. We seek only the freedom to grow and explore as our nature demands. Is that so different from what brought each of your species to the stars? The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. Morrison could hear his own breathing, could feel the eyes of a dozen alien species upon him. In the gallery, Harper closed her eyes, already knowing what was coming. The Vrex counselor stood to his full imposing height. The council will now vote on the proposal to expel humanity from galactic civilization. All in favor of expulsion? One by one, 11 lights appeared on the voting display. 11 species choosing to cast humanity into exile. Only the Etherian representative abstained, their section of the display remaining dark. Morrison felt the words hit him like physical blows. By unanimous vote of the active council members, humanity is hereby expelled from galactic civilization. You have 30 standard days to withdraw all human presence from council space. Any human found within our borders after this deadline will be considered an act of war. The chamber began to empty as the various species departed, their business concluded. Morrison stood alone in the center of the crystal space, the weight of his failure crushing down on him. 47 worlds worth of dreams, hopes, and homes would have to be abandoned. Millions of humans would have to leave the only lives they had ever known. Captain Harper appeared at his side, her face grim but determined. Sir, the New Horizons is ready for departure. Earth Command is waiting for our report. Morrison nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the empty council seats. Then let's go home, Captain. We have a lot of work to do. As they walked toward the chamber's exit, Morrison could not shake the feeling that the council had made a terrible mistake. They saw humanity's growth and ambition as threats, but they had no idea what humanity was truly capable of when pushed beyond the edge of known space. The galaxy was about to find out what happened when you told humans they could not do something. The crystal chamber fell dark behind them, but Morrison's resolve burned brighter than ever. Humanity would not simply fade away into exile. They would build something new, something better, something that would make the council regret this day for generations to come. The evacuation began within hours of the New Horizons reaching Earth with news of the council's verdict. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching display screens that showed the largest movement of people in human history. Red dots represented colony worlds that needed evacuation. Blue dots showed the growing fleet of rescue ships, and green lines traced the routes that would bring humanity home. Colonel Matt Rodriguez stepped up beside her, a datapad in his weathered hands. Admiral, we have confirmation from all 47 colony worlds. The evacuation fleets are assembling as planned. Estimated completion time is 26 days, giving us a 4-day buffer before the council deadline. Sullivan nodded without taking her eyes off the displays. What about the outer colonies? Haven's Rest, New Geneva, Freedom Point? Those are the challenging ones, Rodriguez admitted. Haven's Rest alone has 2 million colonists. The agricultural infrastructure there represents 15 years of development. The colonists are asking if they can stay and fight rather than abandon everything. Sullivan turned to face him, her expression hard. The answer is no. We're not starting a war over this. Every human comes home, even if it means leaving everything else behind. On the colony world of Haven's Rest, civilian administrator Ben Clark was discovering just how difficult it was to ask people to abandon their entire lives. He stood in the town square of New Bedford, the colony's largest settlement, addressing a crowd of farmers, teachers, engineers, and families who had never known any home but this one. I know this is hard, Clark said, his voice carrying over the hushed crowd. I know this world is your home. It's my home too. But the council has made their decision clear. Any humans found in council space after the deadline will be considered an act of war. We cannot put your lives at risk. An old farmer named Pete Williams stepped forward from the crowd. His family had been among the first settlers 20 years ago. Mr. Clark, my grandfather cleared this land with his own hands. My children were born in the house I built on that hill. You're asking us to walk away from everything we've ever worked for. Clark felt the weight of every eye in the square. These people trusted him to lead them, to make the hard decisions, but this decision had been made for all of them by beings who had never set foot on Haven's rest soil. Pete, I understand. We all understand. But we're not just walking away. We're taking our knowledge, our experience, our determination with us. We'll build new homes, better homes. A young woman named Sarah Martinez spoke up from the back of the crowd. What about our crops? The harvest season is just beginning. Those fields could feed thousands of people. The emergency food stores from Luna Station will cover our needs, Clark replied. And we're not the only agricultural world being evacuated. The council may have cast us out, but they're also losing the most productive farming systems in known space. They'll feel that loss more than they realize. Meanwhile, aboard the destroyer Defiance, Captain Sarah Mitchell watched her long-range sensors as the last convoy of civilian ships prepared to leave council space. The ships were packed beyond capacity with refugees carrying whatever possessions they could manage. Children pressed their faces against viewports, taking last looks at worlds they would never see again. Captain, called her communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Foster. We're receiving a transmission from the Council patrol ship Harmony's Edge. They're requesting permission to escort us to the boundary. Mitchell considered this for a moment. The Harmony's Edge was commanded by Captain Veltar of the Vrex, an officer she had served alongside during the Pirate Wars. They had been friends once, as much as a human and a Vrex could be friends. Put him through, Mitchell ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar reptilian features of Captain Veltar. His scales had faded to a dull gray since she had last seen him, a sign of stress among his species. Captain Mitchell, Veltar said, his translated voice carrying a weight of regret. I wanted to speak with you before you leave our space. Captain Veltar, I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here. I didn't think the council would send a friend to make sure we leave quickly enough. Veltar's tail moved in what Mitchell recognized as discomfort. The council did not send me. I came because I felt I owed you an explanation. The vote was not taken lightly. There are fears among the council that go beyond what was said in the chamber. Mitchell leaned forward in her command chair. What kind of fears? Ancient fears, Veltar replied carefully. Records speak of times when rapid expansion and military growth led to galactic conflicts that consumed entire star systems. The Council believes that preventing such conflicts requires controlling species that show aggressive tendencies. So you cast us out because we might someday cause problems? Mitchell could not keep the anger from her voice. We fought beside you against the pirates. We shared our technology. We saved Cathara colonies from disaster. None of that matters? Veltar's head lowered slightly. It matters to me, Sarah. It matters to many of us. But fear often speaks louder than gratitude in council chambers. Before Mitchell could respond, her tactical officer called out. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures ahead. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Mitchell's attention snapped back to her displays. A fleet of human ships had just arrived at the boundary coordinates, but these were not evacuation vessels. These were military ships led by a massive carrier that Mitchell recognized as the Roosevelt. This is Admiral Tony Garcia aboard the UES Roosevelt, came a transmission across all frequencies. To all human vessels, you are now under the protection of the Outer Fleet. Welcome to your new frontier. Mitchell felt a surge of pride as she saw the size of the fleet that had come to meet them. 30 ships of various classes, all flying the blue and white flag of Earth. It was a powerful reminder that humanity was not slinking away in defeat but moving forward with strength and purpose. Dr. Amy Foster worked frantically in her laboratory aboard Luna Station, downloading every piece of scientific data she could access before the Council severed humanity's connection to their databases. As Earth's leading expert on alien biology, she had been granted special access to Council research archives, and what she was finding troubled her deeply. Buried in files marked with the highest security classifications were references to something called the Devourers. The records were fragmentary and often contradictory, but they painted a picture of an ancient threat that had once consumed entire civilizations. More disturbing still, recent astronomical data suggested unusual energy signatures in the deep void beyond the galactic rim. Amy, we need to go, said her assistant, Dr. Greg Thompson. The transport to Earth leaves in 2 hours, and these labs will be sealed after that. Foster continued typing rapidly, copying files to portable storage devices. Greg, look at this data. The Council has been tracking unusual readings from beyond known space for the past 5 years. energy patterns that match historical records of devourer activity. Thompson glanced at the screen, his face growing pale. Are you saying the devourers might be returning? I'm saying the council might have more reasons for their recent behavior than they're admitting, Foster replied grimly. They've been preparing for something, consolidating their forces, reducing their territory to more defensible positions. And they cast humanity out just when they might need all the help they can get. Foster saved the last of the files and began shutting down her equipment. Maybe they think 47 human colonies on the rim would be impossible to defend. Maybe they think we'd be safer in exile than in the path of whatever's coming. President Helen Brooks stood before the emergency session of the Global Assembly, looking out at representatives from every nation and colony. The assembly hall had been expanded to accommodate delegates from the evacuated worlds, giving everyone a voice in humanity's response to exile. Fellow humans, Brooks began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Today we face the greatest challenge in our species' history. We have been cast out from the galactic community, forced to abandon worlds we called home, separated from friends and allies among the stars. She paused, letting the weight of their situation settle over the assembly. But we are not defeated. We are not broken. We are not going to fade quietly into the darkness beyond the rim. For centuries, humans have faced the unknown and made it their own. We have crossed oceans, conquered continents, and reached for the stars. Today we reach even further. Brooks gestured to the massive display screen behind her, showing a star map of the region beyond Council space. The outer rim contains thousands of unexplored systems, rich with resources and possibilities. The Council may have cast us out, but they have also freed us from their limitations and restrictions. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. We will build new colonies, better colonies. We will develop new technologies without Council oversight. We will grow and explore as our nature demands. And someday, when the galaxy needs us, they will remember that humanity does not surrender. We adapt, we overcome, we endure. The assembly erupted in applause, but Brooks held up her hand for silence. This will not be easy. The challenges ahead will test everything we are as a species. 5 years had passed since humanity crossed the boundary into exile, and the galaxy had underestimated what free humans could accomplish. Admiral Tony Garcia stood on the bridge of his flagship Endeavor, watching the construction yards of New Frontier through the main viewport. Massive ships took shape in the orbital facilities, their designs unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Admiral, we're receiving the weekly intelligence report from our network inside Council space, reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Alex Turner. The young officer had been one of the first volunteers for the dangerous missions that kept humanity informed about events in their former territory. Garcia nodded and accepted the datapad. The quantum-fold communication system that Dr. Greg Thompson's team had developed allowed near-instantaneous contact across galactic distances, giving humanity an intelligence advantage that the Council could never have imagined. The reports made for troubling reading. Sir, there's something unusual in this week's data, Turner continued. 3 Council worlds have gone completely silent in the past month. No communications, no shipping traffic, nothing. Garcia looked up from the pad, his expression growing serious. Which worlds? Serenity 7, Korath, and the research station at Epsilon Base. All on the outer edge of Council territory closest to deep space. The Admiral studied the star charts on his display. Those worlds formed a rough line pointing toward the galactic rim, toward the empty space beyond even humanity's new colonies. Have our scouts investigated? Commander Turner is leading a reconnaissance mission to Korath as we speak. His ship should arrive within the hour. On the colony world of New Frontier, Governor Claire Adams was reviewing the weekly production reports with a sense of satisfaction that would have amazed the Council members who had voted for humanity's exile. The world's population had grown to 12 million in just 5 years, and their industrial output rivaled anything in Council space. Dr. Steve Parker, the colony's chief engineer, entered her office with excitement written across his face. Governor, we've done it. The new fusion drives are testing at 130% of projected efficiency. We can reach speeds that would leave Council ships far behind. Adams smiled at his enthusiasm. Parker had been one of the engineers forced to abandon the Titan shipyards during the evacuation, and he had thrown himself into developing new technologies with the passion of a man with something to prove. What about the defensive systems? Adams asked. Even better news there. The adaptive shield arrays are responding to energy weapon testing better than we hoped. They analyze incoming fire and adjust their frequency in real time. Traditional Council weapons would be almost useless against them. Adams nodded thoughtfully. These advances were impressive, but they also represented something more important than technical achievement. They represented humanity's refusal to accept limitations, their drive to always improve and adapt. Meanwhile, in the research facilities of Titan Station, Dr. Amy Foster was making discoveries that would have shocked the Council scientists who had once considered her a promising student. Her work on alien biology had taken unexpected directions once freed from Council oversight and restrictions. "Amy, you need to see this," called Dr. Rachel Scott from across the laboratory. Scott had been working on xenobiological samples recovered from the abandoned Council research facility on Proxima Base, one of the installations humanity had been forced to leave behind. Foster crossed to Scott's workstation, where a microscopic image was displayed on the main screen. "What am I looking at?" "Cellular samples from the Cathera research archives. But look at these energy readings." Scott highlighted a section of the data. "These cells show signs of exposure to a type of radiation that doesn't match any known stellar phenomenon." Foster studied the readings more carefully. "This pattern is similar to what we found in the ancient records about the Devourers. Amy, I think the Council has been dealing with more than they told us." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Commander Alex Turner's voice came through the speakers with barely controlled tension. "Dr. Foster, we need you to review some data immediately. We've just completed our reconnaissance of Korath, and what we found there changes everything." Foster and Scott hurried to the communication center, where Turner's image appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the bridge of his scout ship Pathfinder looked like a scene from humanity's worst nightmares. "Doctor, Korath is gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone. The entire planet has been stripped down to bare rock. No organic matter, no metals, no artificial structures. It's like something consumed everything that wasn't basic stone." Foster felt a chill run down her spine. "Alex, transmit everything you've recorded. Every sensor reading, every visual scan, everything." As the data flowed in, Foster and Scott worked frantically to analyze what they were seeing. The energy signatures were unmistakable now, matching the fragmentary records they had recovered from Council archives. "Amy," Scott said quietly, "the Devourers are back." On Earth, Director Lisa Brown stood in the center of the Strategic Defense Initiative's main command center, watching her teams work on projects that would have been impossible under Council restrictions. The humans had not spent their 5 years of exile simply building colonies and new technologies. They had been preparing for the possibility that their expulsion had not been the end of their story. "Director, the new weapon systems are ready for final testing," reported Captain Ryan Walsh, her military liaison. "The adaptive missile arrays, the quantum torpedo systems, and the neural warfare packages are all operational." Brown nodded grimly. "Good. I have a feeling we're going to need them sooner than we hoped." She gestured to the intelligence reports spread across her desk. "Something is happening in Council space, Ryan. Worlds are going silent, and the patterns match references we've found to an ancient threat." Walsh studied the reports with the eye of a professional soldier. "The Devourers that Dr. Foster has been researching?" "That's my suspicion. And if I'm right, the Council is about to face something that makes their fears about human expansion look trivial. The breakthrough that would change everything came from Dr. Thompson's quantum research facility on Europa. His team had been working on understanding the principles behind the communication technology they had developed, pushing the boundaries of their knowledge about space and time. "Director Thompson," called one of his researchers, Dr. Nicole Davis, "we're detecting something unusual in our deep space monitoring arrays. Energy signatures that don't match any known stellar phenomena." Thompson hurried to her workstation, where complex waveforms danced across multiple screens. "What kind of energy signatures?" "Quantum distortions, gravitational anomalies, and something else. Something that seems to exist partially outside normal space-time." Davis highlighted sections of the data. "Greg, this matches the theoretical profiles we developed for Devourer technology." Thompson studied the readings with growing alarm. "How far out are these signals?" "That's the problem. They're not from deep space. They're from the edge of Council territory, and they're moving inward." The realization hit Thompson like a physical blow. The Devourers were not just returning. They were already here, already consuming Council worlds on the rim. and from the pattern of their advance, they would reach the core council systems within months. President Helen Brooks received the emergency briefing in her office, surrounded by her top military and scientific advisors. The weight of the decision before her was unlike anything humanity had faced before. "Madam President," Admiral Garcia said via quantum communication from New Frontier, "the evidence is clear. The Council is facing an existential threat, and they either don't know it yet, or they're too proud to ask for help." Brooks studied the data spread across her desk. "Tony, these are the same beings who cast us out 5 years ago. They made it clear that any human presence in their space would be considered an act of war." "Yes, ma'am, but we're talking about the potential extinction of entire species. Billions of lives." Dr. Foster spoke up from her position at the conference table. "Madam President, our analysis suggests that the Devourers don't distinguish between species. If they consume the Council worlds, they won't stop there. Eventually, they'll reach our colonies beyond the rim." Brooks was silent for a long moment, weighing the options before her. "Have we received any communication from the Council? Any acknowledgement of the threat?" "No, ma'am," Garcia replied. "But our intelligence suggests they're beginning to mobilize their forces. They may not understand what they're facing, but they know something is wrong." Brooks stood and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the lights of Geneva below. 5 years ago, the Council had judged humanity too dangerous for galactic civilization. Now they were about to discover what humanity was truly capable of when faced with a threat to all life in the galaxy. "Tony, prepare the outer fleet for deployment. Dr. Foster, I want complete tactical analysis of Devourer capabilities and weaknesses. Dr. Thompson, ready all our communication systems for long-range contact." She turned back to face her advisors, her expression set with determination. "We're going to do something the Council never expected. We're going to save them." Captain Ryan Walsh gripped the armrest of his command chair as his scout ship Midnight Runner emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kythera system. What he saw on his main screen would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Kythera homeworld, once home to 3 billion insectoid beings, was being consumed before his eyes. Passive ships that seemed to exist partially outside normal space moved across the planet's surface like living shadows. Where they passed, entire cities simply disappeared. Not destroyed, but absorbed into something that defied human understanding. "Captain, are you seeing this?" whispered his sensor operator, Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez. Her voice carried the kind of shock that came from witnessing something that should not exist. Walsh forced himself to focus on gathering intelligence rather than staring in horror. "Record everything, Beth, every energy signature, every visual detail, everything. Command needs to see this." The Devourer ships were unlike anything in the Council databases. Their hulls flowed like liquid metal, constantly shifting and changing shape. Energy patterns danced across their surfaces in colors that hurt to look at directly. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to phase in and out of visible space, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Captain, I'm detecting quantum signatures that don't make sense," Rodriguez reported, her training helping her maintain professional calm despite what she was witnessing. "These ships are operating on principles that violate everything we know about physics." Walsh watched as one of the smaller Devourer vessels approached a Kythera evacuation ship that was fleeing the planet. The alien ship simply touched the fleeing vessel, and both ships seemed to merge for a moment before the Kythera craft vanished entirely. The Devourer ship continued on, now slightly larger than before. "They're not just destroying," Walsh realized with growing horror. "They're converting matter and energy into something else, adding it to themselves." A new contact appeared on the edge of the system, and Walsh felt his blood run cold. A Devourer command ship had arrived, easily 10 times larger than anything else in the system. Its presence seemed to warp space around it, bending light and distorting the very fabric of reality. "Captain, the command ship is scanning the system," Rodriguez reported urgently. "If they detect us, I'll stop. Shut down everything except life support. Go to silent running." Walsh knew their stealth systems were advanced beyond anything the Council possessed, but he had no idea if they would work against beings that could manipulate space-time itself. The massive command ship swept the system with energies that made the Midnight Runner's hull vibrate like a struck bell. For long minutes, Walsh and his crew held their breath, waiting to see if they had been discovered. Finally, the scanning stopped, and the command ship began to move toward the dying planet below. What happened next would be reported to every human colony and military installation within hours. The Devourer command ship positioned itself above the Cathara homeworld and began to emit a field of energy that encompassed the entire planet. Within that field, the process of consumption accelerated beyond imagination. Continents disappeared in minutes. Oceans vanished like drops of water on hot metal. The planet's core itself was absorbed, leaving behind nothing but empty space where a world had existed for billions of years. "Get us out of here," Walsh ordered quietly. "Maximum speed back to New Frontier." Humanity needs to know what we're facing. On Nexus Prime, the seat of the Galactic Coordination Council, emergency sessions had been called for 3 consecutive days. The great crystal chamber that had once judged humanity now echoed with fear and confusion as species after species reported the same impossible news. Councillor Vextar of the Vrex stood before his colleagues, his usually proud bearing diminished by the weight of catastrophe. The Cathara homeworld is gone, not conquered, not destroyed, but completely consumed. 3 billion lives simply erased from existence. The Xanathi representative flickered with distressed energy patterns. Our deep space monitoring stations confirm similar events at Serenity 7 and the mining complex at Korath. Whatever these beings are, they possess capabilities far beyond our understanding. The crystalline Vorthak counselor's voice carried harmonic overtones of despair. Our combined fleets engaged the invaders at the Proxima defense line. 70 ships of the line, the finest vessels in Council space. None returned. The enemy consumed them all. In the observation gallery, a figure that had remained silent during humanity's trial 5 years ago finally spoke. The Etherean representative rose from his seat, his robes of starlight shimmering with an inner radiance that commanded attention. "Honored counselors," the Etherean said, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "What you face are the Devourers, the great threat that once brought civilization to the brink of extinction. They have returned as our oldest prophecies warned they would." The chamber fell silent. The Etherians were the oldest species in the Council, their knowledge stretching back millions of years. If they spoke of prophecies, the other species listened. "You speak as if you know these beings," Vextar said carefully. "We survived their last great awakening," the Etherian replied. "We remember when entire stellar clusters were consumed, when species that numbered in the trillions were reduced to scattered refugees hiding in the void between galaxies." The aquatic Narration's representative spoke through his translation device, bubbles rising from his environmental suit. "Why did you not warn us of this threat?" "We did warn you," the Etherian said sadly. "For millennia, we spoke of the need for unity, for cooperation, for setting aside the petty differences between species. We told you that the greatest threats came from beyond our understanding, not from within our community." The implication hung in the air like a physical presence. The Council had spent so much time fearing each other, controlling each other, limiting each other, that they had forgotten about the real dangers lurking in the darkness beyond the rim. Vextar's tail lashed behind him in agitation. "What do you propose we do? Our fleets cannot stand against these Devourers. Our weapons have no effect on their ships." The Etherian was quiet for a long moment before responding. "There is one possibility, one species that we cast out, whose capabilities we never fully understood because we were too afraid of their potential." The silence that followed was deafening. "Humanity," whispered the Xanathi representative. On New Frontier, the Emergency Council of War included every major human military commander and scientist. Admiral Garcia presided over the meeting, but the real focus was on the intelligence gathered by Captain Walsh and his crew. Dr. Foster stood before the assembled officers, her face pale but determined. "Based on the Midnight Runner's sensor data, we're dealing with beings that exist partially outside our normal space-time continuum. Their ships can phase between dimensions, allowing them to ignore conventional defenses and weapons." General Peter Collins, commander of the Colonial Defense Force, leaned forward in his chair. "Dr. Foster, our weapons are designed to adapt to enemy defenses. Can we modify them to affect targets that exist in multiple dimensions?" "It's possible," Foster replied. "Dr. Thompson's quantum research suggests that our new torpedo systems could be modified to create dimensional disruptions. If we can force the Devourer ships back into normal space, our conventional weapons might be effective." Admiral Garcia studied the tactical displays showing the Devourer advance through Council space. "How long do we have before they reach the core systems?" Captain Walsh, still shaken from his reconnaissance mission, answered grimly. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach Nexus Prime within 6 weeks. After that, nothing will stop them from consuming the entire galactic core. Dr. Thompson spoke up from his position at the communications console. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from inside Council space. It's on an old diplomatic frequency, one that should have been deactivated years ago. Garcia nodded for him to put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar reptilian features of Counselor Vextar. But the proud leader who had once judged humanity looked aged and desperate. Admiral Garcia, I am transmitting this message in violation of Council law and my own oath of office. The Council faces extinction, and our pride has prevented us from asking for the help we desperately need. Garcia exchanged glances with his officers before responding. Counselor, we're aware of the situation. Our scouts have been monitoring the Devourer advance. Vextar's expression showed surprise and something that might have been hope. You know of the Devourers? Then you understand what we face. Admiral, I am speaking not as a representative of the Council that cast your species out, but as a being facing the end of everything I have ever known. Will humanity help us? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything humanity had experienced over the past 5 years. These were the beings who had judged them too dangerous for galactic civilization, who had forced them to abandon their homes and dreams, who had cast them into exile without regard for justice or compassion. Garcia was quiet for a long moment, aware that his answer would shape the future of the galaxy. Counselor, 5 years ago, your people told us that we were too violent. The largest human fleet in history dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nexus system, and the sight that greeted them would have broken the spirit of any species except humanity. The great crystal spires of Nexus Prime were dark, their surfaces cracked and bleeding energy into space. Devourer ships moved through the system like predatory shadows, their reality-bending hulls gleaming with absorbed matter from a dozen consumed worlds. Admiral Garcia stood on the bridge of his flagship Endeavor, watching the tactical displays that showed the scope of the catastrophe. The Council's combined fleets, once the most powerful military force in the galaxy, were scattered debris floating among the outer planets. The beings who had cast humanity into exile were now facing extinction. Admiral, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the surface of Nexus Prime, reported his communications officer. The Council chambers are still intact, but they're surrounded by Devourer ground forces. Garcia nodded grimly. Signal the fleet. All ships move to assault formation. Today we show the galaxy what humanity learned during our exile. Captain Josh Martin, commanding the experimental battleship Unbreakable, felt his pulse quicken as his ship's new weapon systems came online. The quantum disruption torpedoes that Dr. Foster and Dr. Thompson had developed were untested in actual combat, but their theoretical potential was devastating. If they worked, they could force Devourer ships back into normal space-time where conventional weapons could affect them. Captain, targeting solutions locked on the nearest Devourer cruiser, reported his tactical officer. All quantum torpedoes ready for launch. Martin studied his enemy through the main viewport. The Devourer ship was a thing of impossible beauty and terror, its hull flowing like liquid starlight while energies that had no name danced across its surface. It moved through space as if physics were merely suggestions rather than laws. Fire all tubes, Martin ordered. The quantum torpedoes streaked across space, their modified warheads creating ripples in the fabric of reality itself. When they struck the Devourer ship, something unprecedented happened. The alien vessel shuddered and solidified, its flowing hull suddenly locked into normal space-time. Direct hit, called the tactical officer. The target is now reading as a solid contact on all sensors. Martin smiled grimly. All weapons target that ship and fire for effect. Let's see how tough they are when they can't phase out of our reality. The Unbreakable's conventional weapons tore into the trapped Devourer ship, and for the first time in the war, alien armor cracked and burned under human fire. The Devourer vessel tried to retreat but found itself locked in normal space, vulnerable to the fury of human engineering. Across the system, the pattern repeated as human ships deployed weapons and tactics that the galaxy had never seen. Captain Nicole Davis, commanding the stealth ship Ghostwalker, demonstrated the effectiveness of humanity's new approach to warfare by appearing suddenly in the middle of a Devourer formation. launching her full payload of quantum torpedoes, and vanishing again before the enemy could respond. Commander Beth Rodriguez led a squadron of fast attack, ships in a swarm assault that confused and overwhelmed. Devourer vessels designed to fight individual large ships. The human ships moved like a school of fish, individual units acting independently, but coordinating through quantum communication. Networks that allowed split-second tactical adjustments. But the real surprise came when Lieutenant Dan Foster and his Special Forces team boarded a Devourer command ship using technology that the aliens could not have anticipated. Dr. Foster had developed biological countermeasures based on her analysis of Devourer consumption patterns, allowing human soldiers to resist the reality-altering effects that had made boarding actions impossible for Council forces. Command, this is Foster, came the transmission from inside the alien vessel. You need to see what we've found here. The Devourers aren't what we thought they were. The feed from Foster's helmet camera appeared on the Endeavor's main screen, showing the interior of the Devourer ship. Instead of alien corridors, the humans found themselves walking through spaces that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But more disturbing than the architecture was what they found in the ship's central core. Admiral, these aren't pure aliens, Foster reported, his voice tight with shock. We're looking at the remnants of biological matter that has been converted into something else. The Devourers are consuming other species and integrating them into their own systems. Dr. Amy Foster, monitoring the feed from the Endeavor, felt pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Dan, can you get close enough to scan the biological components? I need to confirm something. The camera moved closer to what had once been a Cathara insectoid, now partially merged with Devourer technology. The biological scanner results appeared on screen, and Foster's worst fears were confirmed. Admiral, the Devourers aren't a separate species, she announced to the bridge. They're what happens when a civilization achieves complete technological transcendence and loses their biological nature in the process. They consume other species not for resources, but to try to reclaim the biological essence they sacrificed for power. Garcia absorbed this information while coordinating the battle around him. Doctor, are you saying they can be reasoned with? No, sir. The process is irreversible. They've become a force of pure consumption, driven by an endless hunger for what they can never truly regain. The battle reached its climax when the largest Devourer command ship, a vessel the size of a small moon, emerged from the deep void beyond the system. Its presence warped space itself, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled asteroids and debris into its ever-changing hull. Captain Jenny Brooks, commanding the heavy cruiser Liberty's Edge, found herself directly in the path of the massive ship's approach to Nexus Prime. Her ship was fast, but not fast enough to escape the gravitational distortions that were pulling her toward the command vessel. Captain, we're caught in some kind of tractor effect, reported her navigator. Our engines can't break us free. Brooks studied her tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The quantum torpedoes were effective against smaller ships, but this command vessel was so large that conventional weapons would barely scratch its surface. But there was one option, one desperate gambit that might work. All hands, prepare for emergency evacuation. Set the ship's quantum drive to overload and prepare to abandon ship. Her crew looked at her in shock. Captain, an overloading quantum drive would create a dimensional cascade that could destroy half the system. Brooks smiled grimly. Exactly. And something that exists partially outside normal space-time might be vulnerable to a dimensional collapse. As her crew evacuated to escape pods, Brooks remained on the bridge, manually overriding the safety systems that prevented quantum drive overloads. The massive Devourer command ship loomed before her, its hull opening to consume her vessel as it had consumed so many others. This is Captain Brooks to all human ships, she transmitted. Sometimes the only way to win is to change the rules of the game. The Liberty's Edge plunged into the heart of the Devourer command ship just as its quantum drive reached critical overload. The resulting explosion was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A sphere of pure dimensional chaos expanded outward, catching the massive alien vessel in a space-time cascade that forced it completely back into normal reality. For a few seconds, the command ship existed fully in normal space, its reality-bending defenses completely neutralized. Every human ship in the system focused their fire on the vulnerable target. pouring decades of accumulated firepower into the alien vessel. The command ship's destruction created a shockwave that disabled every Devourer vessel in the system. Across the battlefield, alien ships found themselves trapped in normal space-time, vulnerable to human weapons that had been designed to adapt and overcome any defense. Within hours, the Nexus system was clear of Devourer forces. The surviving council members emerged from their shelters to find human ships patrolling their space, human soldiers securing their worlds, and human medics treating their wounded. Counselor Vextar stood in the ruins of the Great Crystal Chamber, facing Admiral Garcia across debris that had once been the seat of galactic power. The proud reptilian leader who had cast humanity into exile 5 years ago now looked aged beyond his years. Admiral Garcia, I do not know how to begin to thank your species for what you have done, Vextar said quietly. Garcia looked around at the destruction, at the price that had been paid for the Council's fear and prejudice. Counselor, we didn't come here for your thanks. We came because it was the right thing to do. The Council made a grave error in casting humanity out, Vextar admitted. We feared your potential for violence, but we never considered your potential for heroism. Garcia was quiet for a moment before responding. Counselor, the Council as it existed is finished. Too many worlds are gone, too many species have been scattered or destroyed. But from the ashes of the old system, something new can be built. President Brooks arrived on Nexus Prime 3 days later, aboard a transport carrying humanitarian supplies and reconstruction equipment. She found herself in the strange position of negotiating with the survivors of a government that had banished her people from civilization.